Hi, this video is a re-upload. I posted this video 4 months ago, something like, and ended up promptly deleting it because I got a couple hate comments that hurt my feelings. But I've had some friends ask about being able to view this video and I'm really proud of it. I spent like 2 days working on it, editing it, and I thought it was pretty good. And I've been super depressed lately and haven't been able to make any new content, and I don't want you guys to forget that I exist, so I'm re-uploading it. I do just want to put a disclaimer out there and say that you might have clicked on this video to be mad because you love Nosferatu, and if you love Nosferatu, I think that's awesome. I'm so proud of you. It's a great movie. This is purely opinionated. I'm not a film critic. I don't have a film degree. I don't think I'm Lindsay Ellis. I just like silent films. I like old horror movies. I like vampires. And I like hearing myself talk. So I made this video just for my own enjoyment. You don't have to take anything that I say seriously. In fact, I would advise you not to. I think if you are very passionate about your love for Nosferatu, a better use of your time would be to watch Nosferatu instead of this video. It's on YouTube. I'm pretty sure it's free on Tubi with ads. Why don't you put it on, pop some popcorn, snuggle up with a blanket, and just make a night of it and have a good time. There's no reason to let some random girl on the internet who has no film authority whatsoever make you feel upset or give your blood pressure a rise. I think you can take better care of yourself than that, and it's really not that big of a deal. I don't even think the film is bad. I really just think that it's overrated. There's a difference. I will be popping back in towards the end of the video to clarify another issue, so I will see you then. But until then, enjoy the remastered, re-edited Nosferatu video. Hey book buddies, or shall I say film friends. It's Katie here, and today I'm going to be talking about why I personally think the 1922 silent horror film Nosferatu is a little bit overrated.
Nosferatu!
Now, the last thing I would ever want to do is anger the film people or the goths, so I do just want to quickly say that I think that this movie is good, and I understand why so many people view it as influential. I just don't think that it deserves quite the amount of praise that it consistently gets. So for those of you who don't know, Nosferatu was released in 1922 in Germany. I believe its US release date was 1929, but I could be wrong. It is the story of a mysterious vampire called Count Orlok, better known as Count Dracula, but we'll get into that in a second, who, after being visited in his very creepy castle in Eastern Europe by a man who, for no reason, we'll call Jonathan, buys some land in England, sails across the channel, and then proceeds to terrorize this man who we'll call Jonathan and his wife. And if this sounds familiar, it's because it's the plot of Dracula by Bram Stoker. This movie follows almost beat for beat the exact plot line of Dracula up until the midpoint of the novel. But it's not an adaptation. It's supposed to be its own work of art. But Nosferatu had so many similarities to Dracula that Bram Stoker's widow actually sued the production company and forced them to destroy all of the copies of the movie. Truly, I promise, it's egregious. If you've read Dracula or if you're familiar with the story, Nosferatu is just Dracula. And actually, even though originally I believe all of the characters had different names than they did in the book, the version that I watched actually listed all the cast members under their names as they appeared in Dracula, the novel, with the exception of Mina Harker, who is called Nina. So this movie was banned, destroyed, and all of the versions that you can find, which there are many, you can find it on Tubi, it used to be on Netflix, I think it's on YouTube. These are all technically lost versions of the film, and I think that is a big part of the reason why people are so fascinated with this movie, because I think we as humans generally really like it when things are banned or forbidden and we're not supposed to view them, or for some reason there was some sort of problem with production for any sort of movie. I always find myself drawn to seek out and watch those types of films, and I'm sure I'm not alone in that. So the fact that Bram Stoker's widow sued this movie gave it a lot of mystique, I think, at the time and now. But a lot of the praise that I see for Nosferatu hails it as this creative work of art, this masterpiece. But none of this praise belongs to the writer of Nosferatu. It belongs to Bram Stoker. They didn't originally call Nosferatu an adaptation of Dracula. They tried to pass it off as their own work. So for that reason, in my opinion, the story of Nosferatu really isn't all that groundbreaking. I will say that, to my knowledge, and I could be wrong, Nosferatu was the first film made about a vampire. So vampires just have this sort of draw to them that people are interested in. They speak to something within us as humans. And so I understand why seeing that film at that time, and it's the first film that's ever depicted a vampire, would definitely have an influence on an audience member. And I will also say that although I may not like to admit this, Nosferatu has had an impact on vampire lore as we know it today. And this is because while in Bram Stoker's Dracula and in most vampire mythologies before Nosferatu, it was generally just assumed that vampires were nocturnal. And maybe they were weakened during the daytime because that was their sleepy time. They wanted to go to bed. They wouldn't die in the sunlight or catch fire. This actually originated from Nosferatu. I think because they didn't know how to end the movie. They had gotten halfway through Dracula but didn't have enough runtime, I guess, to finish the plot of Dracula where they stake the vampire. So they came up with this bullshit plot line that only a woman, pure of heart, who offered her blood freely to Dracula and kept him until dawn, would be able to defeat him. And so in Nosferatu, there is this very iconic scene where Nina sacrifices herself, keeps Count Orlok by her side until the sun rises in the morning, and he very dramatically catches fire in the sunlight. And this, as far as I'm aware, is the origin of the idea that vampires can't go out in the sun. Another thing that Nosferatu added that I thought was a nice touch, that they directly connected Dracula's coming to England with the plague, which I thought was interesting, especially at the time they had just gotten out of the Spanish flu, and is relevant today, unfortunately. And although this idea of vampires bringing the plague is not new to Nosferatu, and it's heavily hinted at in Dracula and in other vampire mythologies across the world, I do think that they did a nice job of making that direct connection in Nosferatu. But the film itself, in my opinion, is nothing spectacular. I read an article stating that Nosferatu has this nightmarish, dreamlike quality to it. And the article said that this was because everything was shot in black and white and the film was corrupted. And that's what all silent films look like. That wasn't an artistic choice at the time, so it feels strange to credit it for that. I think that this dreamlike quality can be found in many other horror films. For example, the 1920 German film, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which looks like Dr. Seuss and Tim Burton gave birth to this terrifying child, encapsulates a dreamlike quality both in the set and the costuming and the story itself. And if you're looking for a truly dreamlike quality in a silent film, I would direct you to any of the shorts by Georges Méliès, which are extremely imaginative and dreamlike in every sense of the word, and all existed 2 decades before Nosferatu. To be truly honest, I felt parts of this film were a little slow and dull. And that's not because they're silent films, because I do have the ability to appreciate a silent film with suspense and tension, even if the plot is a bit slow. I just think it was poorly done. While the actor who played Count Orlok, Max Schreck, did give a very nice performance and really portrayed him as a very creepy character and had a very nice presence about him throughout the film. I didn't think that any of the rest of the cast was particularly strong. The actress who played Nina was decent, but the man who played Jonathan just looked goofy the whole time and was really hard to believe any of the performances that he was giving. And I don't think that this is because it's a silent film and you have to be big and exaggerated. I think that they just could have done a better job casting Jonathan and Mr. Renfield for that matter. I didn't think their performances were that strong. There are a couple of shots, I will admit, that I think are really well done and that sent chills up my spine. There's the scene where all of the rats are coming out of Count Orlok's coffin. There's the scene where you see all of the coffins marching down the street because people are dying because of the plague in alarming numbers. And then there's also that really iconic scene where you just see his shadow lurking up the stairs on his way to bite Nina. I think all of those look really good, but other than that, I truly don't feel that the rest of this film has any standout shots. I have also seen a lot of critics say that Nosferatu is the best horror film of all time, which I don't think is the case. You could compare it to, as I've already mentioned, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which, as I said, came out 2 years prior, and I think is terrifying in absolutely every sense. And it does have its fair share of problematic takes, notably the way that it views mental illness, but I find it to be just as terrifying, if not way more, than Nosferatu. Many critics praise Max Schreck for his blank, creepy stare, which I agree is chilling. But the actor who plays Caesar the Somnambulist in Dr. Caligari has an equally frightening blank stare. I've also seen many opinion articles saying that Nosferatu is by far the best vampire film ever to be made. And while it is the first vampire film, I don't think it's the best. Now, granted, I have not seen every single vampire film. I will. Give me time. But I can't claim that accomplishment currently, so I couldn't tell you what the actual best vampire film is, but I can compare Nosferatu to a movie that came out a decade later in 1931. Starring Bela Lugosi.
I am Dracula.
The 1930s adaptation of Dracula is, in my opinion, an excellent adaptation. And what's more, it was actually approved by Bram Stoker's estate and not sued for copyright infringement. This movie does a fantastic job of adapting the story of Dracula into a feature film timescale. I think all of the actors do an amazing job, though I am partial to Bela Lugosi's performance, which could just be because I have sort of a strange obsession with Bela Lugosi. If you follow me on Twitter, I'm sure you're sick of hearing about that, but this movie does a truly fantastic job of depicting the sheer creepiness behind the concept of a vampire and contrasting it really starkly against the real world of London at the time, which I feel that Nosferatu was really trying to do, but just fell short of. There are so many moments where you're at the edge of your seat, terrified, and some may say that it isn't fair to compare the 1931 adaptation of Dracula to Nosferatu because Dracula is a talkie, and many would argue that it's a lot easier to convey emotion when you're allowed to speak. And that's a decent argument, but you only need to look at the facial expressions of all of the characters in Dracula to see that they would do just fine in a silent film. And so while I can't and wouldn't say that Dracula from 1931 is the best vampire adaptation, I can say with absolute confidence that it's a lot better than Nosferatu. So all of this being said, I understand why Nosferatu is considered influential, and if it's one of your favorite films, I think that that's okay. But I don't necessarily think that it deserves to be called this wonderful, creative work of art that completely changed the game. I'm not sure that any of that is the truth. There are plenty of films before and after that do a much better job, in my opinion, of depicting horror, and there are many, many vampire films made after Nosferatu that I think really give it a run for its money. I think that Nosferatu is praised because it's old, it's interesting to look at. Silent movies always have this magical air about them. And Nosferatu was banned, which gives it this extra flavor of mystique. And so I definitely understand why audiences continue to be drawn to Nosferatu. But overall, in my opinion, I think it's an uncreative, stolen work of art that lacks depth. And finally, the elephant in the room. I'm not sure how anybody could watch this film and not notice anti-Semitism. Nazis used some of the rhetoric in the film as anti-Jewish propaganda, and that just grosses me out for obvious reasons. Hi, I'm back. In my original video, I went into a little bit more detail about this and pointed out things in the film that I interpreted as anti-Semitic, but I would like to clarify that I am not Jewish, and I don't have enough knowledge on this to really do it justice, and there actually isn't any evidence that would suggest that any of the people who worked on the film were intentionally being anti-Semitic, but it was used as anti-Jewish Nazi propaganda, and that makes me feel icky. So while it may not have been anti-Semitic on purpose originally, it was used as a weapon, a racist weapon against Jewish people later on in its lifetime as a film. And I just think that that's worth pointing out. I think it would be disingenuous to talk about this movie and not talk about the effect that it had in that arena. And I think it's an unfortunate situation all around. I think that if the people who made this film didn't intend to put that imagery in there, it's unfortunate that their work and their art was used to harm people. And it's also unfortunate for the people who were harmed by it. So I'm going to be leaving some articles, some think pieces written by people who actually know what they're talking about in the description so that you can get a better view of this than I could ever say. But I didn't want to completely cut it out because I do think that it's worth at least thinking about. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I know that this is pretty different from what I usually do and might not be everybody's cup of tea, but I appreciate you watching and I hope you enjoyed, and please let me know what you think of Nosferatu in the comments. I will see you all again very soon with a new video, but until then, happy film watching. Bye. Bela Lugosi's dead. Undead, undead, undead. Undead, undead, undead.